Welcome to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics, the podcast that delves into the power of traditional cattle genetics and the ranchers bringing them back. We're returning to the tried and true practices that prioritize what truly works on the ranch. Each episode, we'll talk to ranchers who are rediscovering the methods that built strong, resilient, efficient, and fertile herds in the 1960s and 70s. These breeders are blending the best of the past with practical solutions for today's ranching world. Whether you're passionate about the future of ranching or curious about heritage genetics, this podcast is for you. Presented by Boss Sires. Tune in as we reconnect with the roots of the herd. Here's your host, Patrick Powers.
Hi, and welcome back to Sustainable Stock. Today I'm talking with Joseph Klotz of Klotz Farms in Sealy, Texas. Joseph is one of the most genuine cattlemen I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to, and his story is proof that sustainable ranching doesn't belong only to the big outfits or the big acres. His family's been raising Brahman cattle for nearly 50 years, and along the way he's learned that profit and practicality have to work hand in hand. From weaning off synthetics to proving that a small herd can stay fertile, functional, and resilient through drought, Joseph has built a model that challenges what most of the industry calls success. He's showing that the old ideas still work when you have the courage to stick with them. Mr. Joseph, are you with me?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, boss. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thank you for finding a minute to come on and talk with me.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure.
Well, Mr. Joseph, as I like to ask each guest, please give us a little rundown on who you are and what kind of operation you're running, and maybe a little bit about the family too.
Okay. My name is Joseph Klotz. I live and ranch in Sealy, Texas. My family started off raising Brahman cattle with my dad and my grandpa in 1975. It was a weekend thing for us in Calvert, Texas. We started with Red Brahman Cross. Well, I was taught that those cattle, by seeing and by my dad and grandpa's advice, just seeing how those cattle did over many years of different environments and different struggles, whether it's drought, winter cold, or whatever it was, they did well. It never was registered. In 1998, I bought my first registered gray Brahman heifer. I had some fertility problems. Bought another heifer in 2003 when I started my place here in Sealy and had fertility problems. I learned, I had a good lesson in pedigrees. I didn't pay attention to the pedigree. Both of those were half sisters out of the same cow, and so that was reset number 2. I guess you would call that.
There you
go. After that, I turned to some neighbors who were longtime Brahman breeders and bought a heifer calf. The cow was on my place, and she had a heifer, and I bought that. From that, I started raising my own females, and then I had some more problems. I had some structure problems, so I culled that. That was reset number 3. Then in 2008, 2007, things kind of changed. I met a very close friend of mine, a very dear Brahman breeder, Jim Bob Trent. And he really, really showed me a lot about Brahman cattle, and things started clicking. I raised grays for years, and my family still has gray Brahman cattle. Dad does. They're at Calvert, and they're used mostly in an F1 operation. However, with my stepdaughter, we've always shown cows not getting. We've done it as advertisement and for entertainment, I guess.
All right. Well, Mr. Klotz, that's a pretty good summary of everything. But before you powerhouse through everything and we don't have an interview left, how about we get into a little bit of each of those?
Sure.
All right. Well, backing up to 1975, the start of that small commercial red Brahman cross herd. What were the things that you took away from that? Your family's herd there. Y'all obviously were already crossing. Did y'all find value in that?
Yes, sir. I can remember some of those cows. I asked my dad this morning, kind of, because he bought those first cows when I was just born. Anyhow, I can remember those cows. What I do remember about is, compared to the Hereford cattle that my grandpa had, that these cows stayed slick. I always they always had a heavier calf, and they always seemed to do good when it was hot and dry. They would hustle, meaning that they were eating grapevines or brush, when some of the other Hereford cattle didn't do that. That always intrigued me. They're slick hide. There are very few ticks on them. Always, for whatever reason, it attracted me to it. And Dad was always in favor of the Brahman cross. He said, simply because they do better on less and they give you more than the British cows.
That's great. Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. What values you felt you took away from your father and your grandfather's operations there and are implementing on your own?
Yes, sir. Grandpa and Dad, Grandpa had a kind of a standoffish method of with his cows. He pulled the calves once a year and that was it. My dad was more a hands-on. Now, granted, this was only on the weekends that we saw these cattle. We lived in Houston and Spring Branch, and we went to Calvert on the weekends and spent summers up there. However, when we did see the cattle, every time, if they didn't have if they had trouble having a calf, the calf didn't survive. Everything had to function on its own, simply because there was no human there to intervene.
Yeah.
And that taught me a lot about function that I forgot and had to relearn.
Yeah. Well, speaking in that regard, what other things carried through? I mean, what level of investment were y'all capable of making? Let's address the input there. I mean, if it was a weekend only thing, or do you recall carrying loads of grain up to see him every week?
So my dad was a sheet metal worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So these cattle were extra income, and there wasn't a whole lot of extra to go around. So they had to make it. I don't remember feeding too many range cubes or hauling grain. I can tell you this: I can remember flipping over square bales and help my dad put square bales in the barn before rolls came around, and then us feeding hay. But other than that, some minerals, like a salt block, they had to make it. If they didn't, they they were gone.
Absolutely. Well, how much of what you're doing today would you say traces back to that era and that time of thinking and the dependency your cattle were allowed to have on human hand? How much of that would you say influences your operation today? Even though you're living there with the cattle, do you still demand them to be just as tough?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I was retaught, that what to ask myself, what would happen if there was no human intervention? If there was no human there, would that calf survive? Would that cow rebreed and give you another calf?
Yeah. All right. Well, moving along to another one of your many points you brought up, your first act in getting into the registered Brahman side of things. Could you walk me through that? What was the thought? Were they held in a opinion of grandiose that would solve all the problems as moving into something with paperwork?
I tell you, well, I thought So moving into the registered cattle, there was a few things I've learned. Number one, that I thought that all cattle were cared for and managed similar to what my dad had done. I found out very quickly that was not the case. That there had been generations propped up on feed for whatever reason. There had been infertile cattle that were kept for whatever reason and then passed on as fertile breeders or breeding cattle to other folks. My ignorance cost me some money and time. However, it was a learning experience that I won't soon forget.
Well put. All right, well, walk me through that. What were the lessons learned? You covered well what we like to speak about, and those are assumptions that come along with cattle.
Yes,
And
sir.
it sounds like you learned some valuable lessons. If you could impart those to myself and the listener, what would they be?
Absolutely. Take nothing for granted and very few at their word. Few meaning the folks when you go to purchase cattle.
Yes, sir.
Don't be afraid to ask any question that you have. Ignorance is might be a good thing, but it could hurt you. In that, if you don't ask the breeder or that seller, hey, is this covered? Is this covered? Like if you were buying a car, there are unscrupulous folks that won't tell you that. That was one of the deals I learned through infertility of buying two different heifer calves off of the same cow. I had to learn to read pedigrees. The other thing is go look at the cattle in the worst possible conditions if you're going to buy breeding cattle, meaning when it's cold and windy or bad drought, that's when I want to go look to find if I'm going to buy anything for my next herd purchase. I want to go look in the harshest conditions, and it'll tell you if those cattle are propped up on feed or if they're on grass, how well they're doing.
I like that. I drove out to my property that I'm on now during the March floods of whatever year that was, because I bought some lowland to see if it drained well. I wanted to make sure the house wouldn't be underwater. But
Yes, sir.
I never considered that. If you want to see if you got good feet, go over there after 3 weeks of rain.
Yes, sir.
See if them cows
Yes,
are tromping around in the mud and aren't walking with a limp.
Mother Nature seldom lies to you.
I like that. That's a great line of thinking there, sir. Well, how would you say that those struggles have helped shape your philosophy? So you've given me the ideas of what to look for there, and that short, sweet little sample. But for example, fertility and function, you struggled with both of those at some point. What lessons were learned in that regard there?
That fertility is heritable. Heritable as in, if they don't pack on the flesh to keep their function going, the last thing they're going to do is reproduce. Nutritional hierarchy says so. Its nutritional hierarchy says I take care of my body first, my offspring, and reproduction is always a luxury of nutritional hierarchy. Function is just that. If they don't function on whatever their condition is, they are worthless. They might look pretty in a picture and have a banner to their name, but if they can't function in a timely manner as as animals, beef or milk, whatever they are worthless.
Well put.
Function and fertility and friendly. Those are my 3 F's.
Function, fertility, and friendly.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get into that. We've covered function. We've covered fertility. Please define what friendly means at Klotz Farms.
Sure. Easy enough. Friendly means gentle, ease of management. And I know of no studies, there probably are some, but the gentler the animals are, they always seem to be a bit more fertile. Whether it's calmness, their systems are working, they're not uptight, but it always seems that the gentle ones, the friendly ones, are the more fertile ones. How I determine friendly is when our Brahman cows have a calf, I go to birth weight the calf with the tape measure around the hoof, and I take my son, and I got a little Chihuahua dog. If the cow shows any kind of aggression, I won't keep her. And if that, to me, that is the most that's the most vulnerable that cow is going to be. If she's going to be aggressive, that's the time she's going to be. If she lets me tag the calf, now she'll smell it and kind of breathe heavy and maybe nudge me out of the way. That's fine. But I will not put up with a cow that I can't tag, or a cow that won't let me birth weight and handle her calf. However, I will not touch the calf until the calf gets up and nurses. The calf has to function without human intervention. Then I will birth weight. Then I will intervene and birth weight the calf.
Yeah. So there's demand on both ends of that.
Yes, sir.
I like that. Well, let's take that next leap. You spoke about your years within the world of show. Could you speak on that some? What got you caught up in that realm?
Sure. So when going back to my high school days, we had cattle. I was in FFA, but we didn't have the money to show cattle. There was the money to pay for feed, didn't have the place to keep it. So, I always wanted to do that. So I saved money, bought land, and got into this registered stuff. Put a halter on this heifer and drug her around for a while. And I like the fellowship. That was really cool. I like the trading of ideas. I like the advertisement. That was a good way. Now, granted, this was in the early 2000s, so the internet, social media wasn't around yet. The internet was in its infancy. So to me, that was the best way to advertise. Did I get caught up chasing some ribbons? Maybe at first, but I had my dad to hold me back. He told me some pretty good lessons. He said, never let a ribbon replace reproduction, and never ever feed the function out of her, son.
I like that, sir.
And those two things, he and I had some lively discussions about that, but those have rang true time and again.
Yeah. Well, I think your father had a pretty good synopsis of that. I mean, that leads me to the question of what did that time period teach you in regards to inputs versus outcomes?
I can tell you this without hesitation. I saw a few things. I saw the cattle were too big. I didn't know that backdating was a thing, where lying about age was a thing for competition. I saw how the cattle were fed better than some human beings, and to the extent to which they would go to supplement this or that or cook feed or whatever. Something never did fit exactly right. Although I still like the show ring, I could never understand why. And these cattle were so fat that I questioned after a while, how could they function on for a regular person like myself, and how could they be affordable? Not so much the purchase of the animal, but the upkeep of the animal, the maintenance, and things didn't set right. So I started breeding for what worked for me. I got sneered out a little bit. That's okay, but my cattle always seemed to function during those times.
Well, I think that's a great point to transition. I mean, the reason I have you on today is because you reflect many of the values that we at Boss Hires believe in. You've named all the right things forward: function, fertility, and you have considerably moderate frame cattle. They're meeting all your requirements, all your needs, and they're of your environment. So if we were to truly highlight your operation today for the listener to understand, could you please describe what your cattle are?
What my cattle are?
Yeah, their size, we've got their temperament, but what is their size? What is the whole package? Because I have you on today to showcase the fact that a smaller producer can be just as profitable in this world.
Sure. I would say the average size of my cow, weight wise, is about that 1,100 pound cow. Would I like, and probably a frame score 5, 4.5 to 5. I have a saying that belonged to my grandpa that I've adopted, and it's, don't let that cow's hip get any taller than your shirt pocket height. Now I'm 6'1",
so you got
tall.
A little more room to give.
Yes, sir. But however, those cows, I like that frame score 4 to 5, around there. Those cows, when you look at total pounds per acre grazing, you can fit 3 of those cows where you can fit 2 1,500 pound or 1,600 pound cows.
Yeah.
And that spreads your risk. So if one cow doesn't breed, you still have two calves coming. Whereas the larger cows, one cow doesn't have a calf for whatever reason, you've lost half your calf crop rather than 33% of it.
Yeah, and the only product you derive a living from, it has a greater opportunity to provide.
Sure. Yes, sir. That's exactly correct. The with it being a smaller cow on smaller places, and let's face it, here in our area, real estate land is the absolute most expensive investment if you're starting a ranch or a farm from nothing. And many of the suburban or small farms, that's exactly what they're doing. They're not generational farms. They're starting from square one.
Yeah, many are asking now, how could you ever ranch this thing and afford the mortgage payment? And that's why you're here speaking to me today, is because I feel like the way you're going about it makes these things a capability of new people coming into agriculture.
Yes, sir. That's exactly correct. That when you can only afford so much land, that you have to fit the cattle to the environment. And that is size of land, that's weather, that's forage that's related to the weather and size, forage availability, and quality. So the smaller cattle seem to do it with ease, with less input.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Joseph, I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to shift our conversation and continue to follow the time scale that you brought in your intro. So I have a note that says around 2002, your desire for functionality shifted your operation to a more regenerative focus. Is that correct?
Yes. The push towards regenerative agriculture started as as two different things happen kind of simultaneously, or three things really. With the COVID shutdown, affordability and availability, with the Ukraine deal that made fertilizer hop up from remember correctly, it was 400 and some odd dollars a ton to $800 a ton, or somewhere there near that. So inputs skyrocketed, right?
Yeah.
And or went way up. And we've had some droughts in there. And I kept thinking, what is a way how I can do things where different events, whether it be nature or political or whatever, where it wouldn't affect me or my family, the ability for me to feed my family. And this regenerative thing kind of appealed to me. I started looking up on social media and talking to some folks, and simply put, I've divided. I've always had my place divided in half, but I started dividing it further, and I started turning back the page of history and thought, what happened long ago? And the buffalo were the answer. Kind of is we simply mimic what the buffalo were doing here long ago. I invoked the help of the NRCS to come around and kind of help me with grazing, or a grazing plan. But more so than that, we watched what happened, and we changed what we thought we needed to do. We watched what the cattle did. We paid attention to the grass and how nature responded. And by doing that, it showed us through this year has been the third year we have not used synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, nor wormers. And the flies are very minimal. My cattle do not have worms. And I still have grass enough to where I probably won't have to feed hay till after the first of the year. And that is on a 12-acre place. I graze a cow per every acre and a third, and I still cut my own, raise and make my own hay on this 12 acres.
That's great. So you're rotating your hay along with the cattle and using them as a tool.
Yes, sir.
You texted me a photo about 2 weeks ago, and it was a nice, luscious field, and it said 120 days of forage rest, 60 plus days since rain, no fertilizer or herbicide, and all the females are bred.
Yes,
I can't
sir.
think of a greater checklist, huh?
I'm sorry?
I said, I can't think of a greater checklist to be accomplished.
Yes, sir. That's with regenerative agriculture and fitting the cattle to that. It has certainly, it's dropped our input cost way down, probably 1/3 of what it was when I was showing cattle with them hopped up on grain. It's our resiliency through like this drought, or mini drought or dry time we had this fall. We still have grass. The cattle are all bred. They're slick. They're doing good. It puts your mind at ease. However, I walk through the pasture every day to check on the cattle and look at the grass, and you see how that's responding. When we stopped using conventional or synthetic fertilizers, it took a few years, but when we started digging in the ground, we noticed more earthworms and deeper roots. And we're building soil. When you leave enough grass cover on the soil to keep it cool and shaded, you do a few things. You preserve what moisture you have there. You create a livable environment for my soil biology, the microbes to work, and you hold on to more water. That is, when we've had some rains, I've noticed my stock pond doesn't fill up as easy or as much. When I started kind of poking into it, 1 inch of rainfall per acre equals about 22,000 gallons of water. Very seldom do I have runoff on my place. And my place is in the 12 acres, there's about a foot of drop through the whole place. It's very flat. It's heavy black gumbo clay soils. However, when you have that organic matter there, you preserve the moisture. You hold the moisture in. And the soil tilth has changed too. When I walk in the pasture, does it stick to my boot? Yes, it does. Does it? But it's not. It comes off much easier.
Yeah. I really like that you spoke to the peace of mind granted by building these kind of systems. And you highlighted so wonderfully what all it truly insulates you from. It's environmental, political, economic. When you can put all these things in action and have cattle that can utilize it well, you reap the benefits no matter what the current state of the world is.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
That's very appealing, sir. You make it sound very appealing. Well, I've got to ask. So that was 2022, and we spoke all the way through COVID and getting into now. And it seems like your switch to red Brahman was this year. Walk me through that.
Sure. My stepdaughter Elena had a fondness for reds. My best friend Jim Bob Trant had dabbled in some reds. I thought, what a good way to turn, go, full circle back to what my family had started with. And I had always wondered about commercial grass-based reds. I saw a lot of them in the stock show. However, I didn't see too many red commercial bulls at the local replacement sales in fall or spring. And the reds seemed like the classes were a bit smaller, kind of a less competition. And so we went that way. Another note on the reds is we, with our gray Brahman cows, we started milking our cows on an as needed basis for household use. The effects, the health effects, positive health effects of Brahman milk, raw Brahman milk, is unbelievable. We gave it to my infant son, and the pediatrician loved it. Loved the effects. That it for my own self, my stomach. I can drink raw Brahman milk on a hot afternoon with no ill effects. I can't say that about pasteurized store-bought milk. And so the reds were kind of a dual purpose deal, right? Not that grays aren't, but the reds seemed, with a little bit more gear influence, that they had the milking ability. And so we kind of started moving into that direction. And man, it's really been a challenge to find the correct red genetics. However, when you do, they work just as well as the grays in a regenerative way. They are a real treat. No bad dispositions. I'm sure they're out there, but the dispositions are really good. But the milking ability in the not only for human consumption, but in a beef world, the weaning weights. Did my weaning weights go up? I can tell you this: the weaning ratios went up, and we also we butcher a calf a year for our own family consumption. And we butcher them at about 9 months old. We'll butcher the same genetics, the same cow and bull mix this year. But last year, that red Brahman calf was probably some of the tenderest beef we've ever eaten. And that was milk-fed beef and some grain that we grew here on the farm that we gave him. However, if the calf this year turns out just as tender, that tells me that's not only management, but that is genetic.
Absolutely. Well, it's so funny that you just glanced over your capability to diversify farms' income and just added it as a side note. That I think that truly shows to your ability to work around all these things and your desire to have a hand in all of it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, they milk great and it's awesome. And I guess that would be one of the positives. Like, oh, okay, so there's no income or a dollar saved in that. So no need to really note on it too hard.
The health effects of Brahman milk or Bos Indicus milk, there was some studies done on it. And there was another Brahman breeder that did some studies here a while back that he talked about the health benefits. And there's some type of beta casein protein that doesn't cause a peptid in the small intestine, and because of the butter fat melts at a lower body temperature, they think it's more heart healthy. I'm not a scientist nor a college professor, but I can tell you this: us eating Brahman meat and drinking Brahman milk has sure made my family. I don't know about healthier, but it's kept us well fed.
Yeah. Well, I won't worry till y'all start mooing. So. Well, sir, you've brought up Jim Bob Trent twice now. Who is he and what influence has he had on you?
Jim Bob Trent was a fellow Brahman breeder. He passed away in January 21. COVID got him. However, I've never known a truer friend and a truer advocate for the Brahman breed, who was the fellow was, he lived and breathed Brahman cattle. He could look at stuff and tell you more about the animal's pedigree. He could see stuff about the animals, flaws in the animals that I know of very few. He was a master breeder. He knew how to look beyond the animal to see what crosses would work, and he culled ruthlessly. All of these things he instilled in me simply by osmosis and many a late night, early morning conversations and many miles down the road and through the pastures.
Yeah, it's kind of funny what a windshield education can impart to you, isn't it?
Yes, sir. It's I didn't pay for any college books, but I guarantee you, over a few beers, we learned a lot.
That's good. Well, what are some of the things that you carried away from him? What were what would you say were some of his key things that he managed to notice and impart to you?
Jim Bob would always ask, what would you do, or what would that animal do if the humans weren't there? Would the animal survive? Would it rebreed? If you didn't trim their hooves, would they survive? Why would you trim their hooves? Or if you didn't do this, and another thing Jim Bob always told me too, that's kind of going going away from cattle, but he always said the number one limiting factor in any grass deal is moisture. And he was always big on, he said, man, we've got to get away from our dependence upon fertilizer. That was another thing that kind of went into my regenerative agricultural thinking.
Yeah.
However, on the cattle, he was adamant about making sure these animals would function as they should without human intervention, that human intervention was there to enhance it, not to help it.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Klotz, I think we might have found the root of your what and why. For the listener, I've had the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Klotz a few times now, and he's constantly questioning the what and the why of cattle.
Absolutely. I ask myself sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times a day, why am I doing this? Why is this way? And how could I fix this? Or how could I screw it up?
I think that might be the most important one there.
Sure. It goes back to that thing of it's important to know what to do, but it's also important what not to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so that goes into my line breeding deal of, I know what I have when I line breed, but more importantly, I know what I don't have. I'm not inheriting somebody else's problems that they didn't clean up themselves.
That is incredibly well put and insightful.
That is a Guy Jeans. That is a Guy Jeans saying.
I like
God
that.
rest his soul.
Well, sir, with all those statements made, I was, coming back to yet another reason why I've asked you on today. I was really hoping you could speak about the profitability and scale. A lot of people have in their mind that you have to hit over 100, or they have this number of acres or cattle in their mind before profitability is reached. And I really would like for you to challenge that today.
Okay. Well, let's break it down in the simplest terms. What is profitability? Profitability is making more money. You have here's another saying of my daddy's, my grandpa's. It's not what you have, it's what you got left. There's profitability.
Yeah.
And profitability, whether you're raising 1 cow or 100 cows, it's what you have left at the end of the day. Now, with this regenerative grazing, it's lowered my input costs, giving me greater chance at profitability. On a small place, by lowering your cost per exposed cow, you need to figure per exposed cow, not just, okay, I have this many calves, so I divide up all my input costs. No. You figure up per exposed cow, because figuring it per exposed cow tells you what your true cost is, even on the ones that didn't bring a calf. You have to figure that in.
Yeah.
And when you figure that in, that tells you what your input costs. When you know what you have in the animal or in the calf, then you know what you have to get to at least break even. So then it comes your salesman technique or your marketing, how you market, whether it be a direct producer to consumer, which is a really big thing that's come out since the 2020 COVID episode. And for small producers, that might be one of the easier things, where a larger producer doesn't have that luxury, or they do, to market their beef directly to consumers.
Yeah, they can't do it at scale.
Yes, sir.
Or someone at your size, let's just say you have under 30. It's easy enough for you to peel one off and have enough freezer room for that to then market locally and sell to friends and neighbors at a profitable margin.
Sure. I've started doing that long ago, man. I figured, hey, the folks that I worked with, asked them, hey, of course, at lunch, we always talked about it. And hey, y'all want to buy beef? I'm about to butcher a calf. And the answer was always yes. And so I figured out pretty quick that was a way to market my calf.
Yeah.
There's
kind of
nothing
funny.
wrong with
Kind of funny, all the people crying about the price of beef, and they're only buying a single sirloin at a time. Anybody who's either sold quarters or bought one can tell you that buying quarters or halves on cattle has been climbing like crazy in the last 5 years.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Well, I also like your earlier statement. It's what's left, and there's another side of your relationship with cattle and land that people often forget. What's left is a statement made after you have an input cost. You have a projected cost, you have a projected profit, and then it's that plus or minus what's left. There's something else remaining whenever you treat your operation as a whole, as the way you do. You end with an improved land. You end with a stronger herd, and all of these things are renewable. So it doesn't require additional investment each year. It just requires a better utilization of each.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. You know, without getting too philosophical, we're only allowed so much time here on Earth. How much that is, who knows, man? We all have expiration date on our milk carton. However, look, Mother Earth is all we got. When besides God and our family, Mother Earth is all we got. We derive our whole living off of 3 inches of topsoil, or however deep it is, right?
Yeah.
When the first folks came over here to Texas, the topsoil was deep and rich because for so long it had been rejuvenated. Nature had taken care of itself. The buffalo had came through, they grazed, they left their wastes, which fed the grass, and they let it rest. That grew organic matter, which nature, it was a whole circle of life. And somehow we have, I'm not sure, there's probably many explanations or many theories, but we've gotten away from that circle of life. And regenerative agriculture with these cattle have sure taught me that it's circle of nutrients. And it's kind of who's barring them like a card game or something, who's barring it at a certain time. And
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
No, that's great. In fact, not to get too philosophical, I just finished up a book. Hold on, I've got to look at the name real quick, and I'll plug it. Oh, I would invite you to read it as well. I think it really carries along with our themes. It's a Wendell Berry book, The Unsettling of America, and he speaks about it in a manner like you are there, that we broke our tie to these systems, and so we don't value them, and so we don't impart anything back to them. We don't look at the investment as a whole because we've broken the market in so many pieces. We view them individually in their profitability. So why would you reinvest in each aspect of it?
Right.
Now that's my synopsis of his work.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
You have to, when you start looking at the whole picture, and that's something that this regenerative grazing or regenerative agriculture has taught me. When you start looking at the whole picture, you understand that you're a part of a larger circle. And when you instead of trying to break the circle, that you go along with it, man, it makes life so much easier, so much cheaper, and things seem to go along a lot easier.
Bingo. Well, all right. Well, getting into more of these themes, I was wondering if you could speak on some of the old school practices you've brought about. I feel like you and I are constantly sending photos back and forth of Facebook Marketplace, ancient equipment that's been adapted to, newer stuff. I know the other day I sent you the sickle mower head that was adapted to a riding Cub Cadet mower. And
yes, sir.
And you sent me the hand square baler, the hand powered square baler. What are some of these old school practices and borrowed ideas that you'd like to implement?
Well, the first one that I'd like to talk about, my dad, when he first got in the cattle business with that red Brahman influenced cow. He was, my dad's a sheet metal worker, the same as I. He made a set of stock racks out of sheet metal. Think of your sheet metal gates, but they were stock racks for a 70, or his was 69. Grandpa's was a 72 Chevrolet. Anyhow, they made a set of stock racks, and that's how they carried cattle. Well, when I bought my place, I even before that, I thought, man, what a cool way to do things. When I was a boy, that was just going out when people started using trailers more often, right?
Yeah.
And so I started carrying cattle in the back of my pickup truck with a set of stock racks I made here at the house. It was a practical deal in that it didn't cost me a whole lot of money. I wasn't buying tires, and didn't have to buy trailer tags, and it didn't take much effort to back up. All right.
There's a hell of an advertisement too. You do that with your 2,000-pound bull, that's wild as shit.
Yes. So you just took my next sentence square out of my head, man.
I'm sorry.
No. That's a good thing. Is that when I started carrying cattle around, it started advertising, and it got to be well known. And I can't go very far without somebody saying, "Yeah, I saw Klotz hauling cattle somewhere," and so it got to be a very, very cheap way to advertise, and a very practical way to show how gentle they were, to keep money in my pocket. I'm not raising a whole lot of cattle, so it's a practical way to do it. And then that was one of my cow mentors that I never met, old JT White from Hearn. He carried cattle like that in the old 49 model pickup. Now, my half-ton Ford, I load them up in there, and they boogie on down the road. You're not going anywhere quick and taking any quick turns, but you'll get there in one piece.
Boy, you're getting close to my kinfolk bringing up Hearn.
Yes, sir.
Over in Burlington Lot. That's where
Okay.
That's where my grandparents are.
I'll be damned.
Yep.
Well, Calvert's just next town up, man. I've spent a lot of time in Robertson County and still do.
Yeah, that town died with the railroad and the post office.
Right. Right. The second thing that's really helped me and would help a small producer, Lord knows I've spent some money, and I'm not saying it's the wrong way or anything else, but I used a sickle bar cutter. I used the old one, and then I bought a new one, and I used it. And I talked to my dad, and he said, we were in a conversation. He said, "Man, I remember when people used to cut hay with a shredder." Well, what? And so I started kind of looking around, and bush hogs, sure enough, used to make a regular rotary mower or shredder that the left side unbolted, and you would cut hay. And so I started digging around on the internet, and got one of my brother's older shredders and asked him if I can butcher it up. And sure enough, man, it worked. And kind of the neat thing about it, I've since learned, is that it almost works like a hay bind, in that it crimps the hay, or it shocks the grass enough to, it seems like it dries a little faster, whether it's beating the grass around or whatever. As long as your blades are sharp, man, it cuts hay very well. And the parts are readily available. Tell me what Tractor Supply or some little town doesn't have shredder parts.
Yeah, and the glory of that is you're not required the $30,000 cost of entry with a large tractor.
Yes, you can take a 4-foot shredder, a used 4-foot shredder with a 25 horse tractor, and cut hay, and it works great. and These are all, it's the same theory as the cattle. They're low input cost, and they're very old. They're old American inventions. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just using what was there long ago when like my grandpa or my dad, when they started out, these were common practices that didn't cost a lot of money and therefore gave you greater chance at profit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the big thing now, too. I think it's beautiful that we're speaking to that. As of right now, the big thing going on in the world of cattle politics is the cost of beef and bringing it down and the plans of action in that regard. And so everybody's making the statement that beef isn't that crazy. Not whenever you consider the fact that the pickup, and they're quoting the price of beef from the 80s. Well, the pickup trucks were 300% lower. The tractors were 275% lower in cost. All these acts of production and work, all these things of action were a third the cost. Yet beef hasn't even doubled yet.
Sure.
So it's really beautiful to hear you speak on the ability to do all these things within an average man's budget.
Absolutely. That's I am a sheet metal worker during the day, and I come home and fiddle with cattle and corn in the afternoons, evenings. Simply put, I've looked backwards to try to see a way forwards.
I like that. Well, moving on to some more grandiose questions. What would you say motivates you to keep pushing in the face of mainstream ideas that these are thoughts of the past, that these cattle are too small to be sustainable or profitable, that why would you go through all that effort whenever it's as simple as buying the product, sprinkling it on, and the land can be just as fertile? What motivates you, sir?
It's pretty easy to go do something and get an immediate fix. However, when you do something the right way and take your time, usually it tastes good now, later, and a year later. And the folks that I know of that are doing it conventionally around me, and to each their own. I'm not here to tell somebody how to do it, but when harsh conditions come around, and they will continue to come around. I have plenty of grass when my neighbors are feeding hay.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Klotz, can I ask you this? How would you feel if I made the statement that your future proofing of these cattle and making them resilient to drought and these changes in nutrition availability, would you feel that the statement that your cattle have a greater chance of going and feeding the world than a blue ribbon winner, would that fall wrong to you, or would you agree with a statement like that?
Well, I can tell you this. Again, to each their own. However, when somebody has to prop things up when those cattle have to be propped up on grain for them to look like that or to perform, when the cattle that are raised in a regenerative way don't need that, yes, they will produce product for the ordinary person that doesn't have the ability, whether it be affordability or availability, to prop that animal up. And it gives that person a chance to make profit, which would be income, therefore feeding their family.
Well said. Well, you feel like you're ready for the big question?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
All right. Well, Mr. Klotz, I ask each guest that comes on, in your opinion, what is the moral obligation of the cattlemen to the land, the cattle, and future generations?
I think the moral obligation of the cattlemen would be to raise beef and milk in a sustainable way to not only feed their generation, but it'll let the next generation do the same for themselves. So we're not harming the earth or the cattle. However, we're making steps where that next generation can do the same for themselves.
I like that. Well, sir, I really thank you coming on and really helping get the message out there that these principles are for anybody at any size. I like that your family's operation stands in direct challenge to the idea that I'm just not big enough, I just don't have enough cattle, or, oh, that's only profitable whenever you can get up to this many head, or whenever you have this many acres to move across. You give a little guy like me big hope.
Well, good, man. The world is what you make of it. I think the size of operation is just that. Hold your head up high. If you have 1 cow or 100 cows, do what's needed to do to make profit and to sustain our Mother Earth.
Well, to the listeners, thank y'all for tuning in for this episode of Sustainable Stock. If you enjoyed it and our message, please like and share. That's the only way this message goes further, is by you guys sharing and enjoying it with us. And with all that said, don't forget to ranch with purpose
and breed for the future.
Thank you for tuning in to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. Join us next time as we continue exploring the legacy and future of cattle ranching. For more information, visit us at bosssires.com. That's BOSSIRES.com. Or connect with us on Facebook. Until then, stay rooted in common sense and connected to the herd.